With the trade deadline right around the corner, GMs around Major League Baseball are refining their wish lists to make their clubs better. Some teams need quite a bit of work to turn themselves from playoff hopefuls to World Series contenders. Others need just a couple depth pieces to make themselves stand head and shoulders above the rest. Whether it's the blockbuster that sent Juan Soto to San Diego or the complete outfield rebuild by the Braves in 2021, the trade deadline can completely alter the competitive landscape of Major League Baseball, if only for the rest of the season. Let's take a look at the standings and see who might be buying, selling, or standing pat. The National League remains as top-heavy as we've seen in recent years. The Braves have the best record in the National League by some margin, and on paper look like the most complete team in baseball. The lineup is among the deepest in baseball, they lead the league in home runs and OPS, are second in batting average, and third in runs scored. They also lead the majors in ERA and are among the top teams in baseball in saves and home runs allowed. So what's the Braves' weakness? Depending on who you ask, it could be the lack of an elite contact hitter, someone to put the ball in play at a high rate, or the lack of a shutdown reliever. AJ Minter and Raisel Iglesias have both had their struggles this season, and though relievers like Ben Heller and Michael Tonkin have been valuable additions, the Braves lack that high-impact reliever to put a stranglehold on opposing offenses. The Dodgers haven't looked as strong as they have in years past, but still went into the All-Star break at 51-38. Their down years are better than most other franchises, and will surely be a factor come the pennant race. But as I've said in past videos, the Dodgers don't seem like the kind of team to make a ton of moves at the break unless the Angels will do the unthinkable and trade Ohtani before the offseason. If they do, the Dodgers are set to be in that conversation. With pitching being the Dodgers' huge weakness this season, you can't imagine they've moved any prospects or major league talent for anyone other than Ohtani. Which doesn't leave a lot in the way of big-time contenders in the National League, at least to this point in the season. The Mets and Padres were tabbed to be juggernauts of the National League, but haven't lived up to it as of yet. And with both teams a few games below 500 at the break, they'll really need to get hot to justify any major trades at the deadline. Which leaves the three surprises of the year as the biggest competition for the Braves, as of now. The Marlins, Diamondbacks, and Reds are three of the biggest surprises in baseball and could conceivably give the Braves a run for the NL pennant. And of course, we can't forget about the current pennant holders in Philadelphia. But we expected more from the Phillies, as did they, and their roster is already well suited for a run in October. Though they optioned Yuri Perez to the minor leagues at the break, the Marlins pitching staff is well documented as their strong suit. Sandy Alcantara hasn't been his best this year, but the 2022 NL Cy Young Award winner is still more than capable of shutting down lineups around the league on any given day. Jesus Luzardo has continued to develop as a top-tier left-handed starter in baseball with a high 90s fastball and good secondary pitches. And Edward Cabrera's first extended taste of the big leagues has kept the Marlins within striking distance of the Braves. Though the bullpen hasn't been great, and they've way outperformed their run differential, you can't discount the Marlins from picking up a bullpen arm or two and another impact bat to keep their postseason hopes alive. The Arizona Diamondbacks were going to be tricky this season, and they've only gone and surpassed any expectations people had on them for this year. Corbin Carroll is maybe the one player preventing Ronald Acuna Jr. from being a true runaway NL MVP. Zach Gallen has been the Cy Young Award frontrunner, and the D-backs are keeping pace with the Dodgers for the top team in the NL West. But outside of Merrill Kelly and Gallen, the pitching staff lacks the star power to give them a real chance at taking down the Dodgers in the West. An arm or two in the rotation to supplement Carroll, Gurriel Jr., Christian Walker, and the rest of the D-backs lineup should give Arizona a real fighting chance at taking down the Dodgers. Rounding out the National League, arguably the sexiest dark horse pick in baseball, is the Cincinnati Reds. Elly De La Cruz has done the borderline unthinkable. He's taken part of the national conversation away from Shohei Ohtani. It takes some kind of special player to do just that. De La Cruz isn't just a five-tool player, he does them all really well. He hits piss missiles, he runs fast, he's a solid defender, and he plays the game with the same swagger and childlike enthusiasm that we all need. And that's just him. Matt McClain, Spencer Steer, and the rest of the young Redlegs have Cincy absolutely buzzing. Their first half series against the Atlanta Braves had a playoff-like atmosphere while breaking a single series attendance record at Great American Ballpark. The Braves and Reds have played 6 games against each other this season, and all 6 of them have been one-run affairs. The Reds have more than just reason for optimism. They really could throw a wrench in the National League standings this year. Over to the American League, where no breakdown of the standings is complete without a thorough analysis of Shohei Ohtani's impact on the sport. Ohtani's iconic matchup against Angels teammate Mike Trout in the 2023 WBC final was just the beginning of what was to come for the first half of the season. Ohtani is among the best in all of Major League Baseball, not just the AL, in so many offensive and pitching metrics. But as the Angels continue to be hit by the injury bug, questions about the Angels' trade deadline plans continue to multiply. Should the Angels, who sit 5 games out of a wildcard spot at the break, entertain trading the most valuable player arguably in the history of the sport? Or do they risk losing him for nothing in the offseason? Mike Trout won't be back in the lineup before the trade deadline, leaving Perry Manassian and owner Artie Moreno with an impossible conundrum. Angels fans, cherish these next few months regardless of whether or not the playoffs are in your future for 2023. Staying in the AL West, the Texas Rangers made another huge splash this offseason just as they did before last season. A year removed from bringing Corey Seager and Marcus Semien to Arlington, the Rangers splashed the cash for the best pitcher in baseball when they signed Jacob deGrom to a 5-year, $185 million deal prior to the 2023 season. With new manager Bruce Bochy at the helm, the Rangers have one of the best offenses in baseball, and the addition of Nathan Eovaldi to the rotation has made Texas a real contender this year. But with deGrom out until at least the latter part of 2024 after undergoing Tommy John, the Rangers will need to bolster their rotation and their bullpen if they want to put some distance between themselves and the rest of the division. The Astros are the Astros. We know they'll be relevant come September and October. Framber Valdez is one of the best pitchers in baseball, and it's gotten even better this season. The World Series hangover isn't as much of a conversation now, especially considering the fact that despite struggling by their standards, they're still only 2 games back of Texas for the division. We look for them to make 1 or 2 under-the-radar moves that will absolutely pay dividends later in the year. It's just what they do. Tampa Bay continues to hold the best record in the American League, and while they aren't as dominant as they were to start the year, the Rays always seem to be in the mix regardless of who they put on the field. The pitching staff has been decimated by injuries, with Rasmussen and Springs both out for the year. But Glasnow's return to form and the emergence of Taj Bradley will always give the Rays a chance to make noise. Count out the Rays at your own peril. But is there one specific thing that they need to do at the deadline to get better? Probably not. But you just know that whatever they decide to do, it'll give them a really good chance to march through October. Baltimore is maybe the Cincinnati equivalent in the American League. The youth movement is strong, and the team is led by young hitters like Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Cedric Mullins, Austin Hayes, and a bevy of young prospects coming through the system. While the rotation may be a bit of a question mark, Yanier Cano and Felix Bautista have formed one of the most dominant 1-2 punches in any bullpen across the league. A frontline starter might be the piece the Orioles need to make a deep run into October. As for the fringe teams, the Mariners haven't lived up to the heightened expectations for the season, but with notable offseason acquisition Teoscar Hernandez starting to heat up and Julio Rodriguez's superstar performance in the home run derby, the Mariners might just look at making a trade or two and giving the Seattle faithful reason to believe they can go one better than they did last year. The Yankees have gotten virtually nothing from their offense outside of Aaron Judge this year, as was the case for much of last year. In the space between Judge's injury and the All-Star break, the Yankees are last in batting average and on-base percentage. Tough to be competitive when scoring runs seems to be an issue in the hardest division in baseball. Every team in the AL East is at or above 500, and you can easily envision every single wildcard team coming from the same division. The Blue Jays have been a real head-scratcher. The offseason acquisition of Dalton Varsho seemed like it would give them that extra outfield depth, but Varsho has struggled in his time in Toronto so far. Kevin Kiermaier may be one of the best signings of the season, playing a Gold Glove center field, while maybe more importantly, allowing George Springer to play right field rather than center. But Alek Manoah's massive struggles early in the season have been a huge problem for the Jays, and while his stint in rookie ball seemed to be huge in getting his confidence back, the Jays need him to return to his best self if they're going to break through the middle of the pack in the AL. The biggest day of the MLB season is just around the corner, and so many questions remain for a ton of the big-time contenders. But more importantly, some big names from struggling teams could be on the move this trade season. The White Sox have a trio of pitchers who may well be on the move given the Southsider struggles. Giolito, Cease, and Hendricks could all be on the move in a couple weeks, as with the Nats' Jeimer Candelario or even Joey Meneses. And of course, there is the small chance that the Mets and Padres will shed some of their payroll should their seasons continue to go south. It's unlikely, but Max Scherzer signaling his willingness to waive his no-trade clause isn't a non-story. Everything is on the table for the biggest teams in baseball. Buckle up, folks. Deadline season is here, and it figures to be one of the craziest in Major League history.